This is Warcaster Collision Course. This is also kind of Warcaster Collision Course. And so is this, and well, you get the idea. Welcome to the Tabletop Battlefield. I'm Jason, and today we're taking a look at some of the items from Collision Course. This is the first expansion for Privateer Press's sci-fi miniatures game, Warcaster Neo-Mechankia. So I've got here the rules for the expansion. I've got the new starter set for the new race. Here is one of the vehicles for the Iron Star Alliance. And then I've also got one of the new units for the Iron Star Alliance. So let's get started by taking a look at the rules themselves. So inside this expansion set here, we have a new rule book. And we also have some new Cypher Cards. We'll talk about these in a moment. Let's start with some of the interesting points of the fiction. The first interesting point of the new fiction I want to show you here is this picture from pages 10 and 11 in the rule book, where we have a battle going on between the Eternus Continuum and the new faction, the Empyreans. Up in front here, you have a guy that looks a lot like a Marcher's World character. I say that's a color scheme. He's got the blue and the yellowish from the Marcher Worlds. Which I wonder if that implies there's going to be some sort of possible alliances between the human factions against these new alien race, because they're kind of the big bad guys per se in the storyline. And there's one more interesting little tidbit here on the next page talking about the Eons, who are the hero characters of the new faction, the Empyreans. And it was the Eons who later fought the ancient enemy and drove them from the galactic center to the fringes of known space where they yet remain, beyond the marches and all the territories claimed by humanity. I have no idea who the ancient enemy is in this context, but it looks like Privateer Press might be setting up something really cool down the line here with the story of Warcaster. So for the new rules, there's basically 3 new sections, if I'm counting correctly. And probably not, like I don't always do, but you know. First up, you have the vehicles. I'll talk more about the details of those when we look inside this guy. But they're a new unit in the game, and they offer a little bit of something different compared to warjacks and infantry. So next up, in terms of new things, is something called a mantlet. Now this is not quite terrain, it's not quite a unit. What it really is deployable, destructible cover for your units. You're looking at a picture of them from the Kickstarter here. I don't have any of these at the moment, but I'll see about getting some of them in the not too distant future. And the third major new rule set is a new type of game mode called Race. This is a version of Warcaster that's based around a vehicle. So you have your vehicle as the main unit of your army along with some other guys, and you're essentially moving along this treadmill type setup of terrain tiles, trying to basically blast through enemies and keep racing forward and not have your vehicle destroyed by the end of the race. There's several scenarios to play with this, and also as one of the items you could have bought with the Kickstarter were the tiles for this game mode. So once again, I don't have those. But all the rules to play this game, and you could play this without the tiles, they're in this rule book as well. You're looking at the version of the Interceptor stat card for race mode right here. So in addition to the new rules, you've got 6 new then main scenarios right here for the normal battle size, and 3 new skirmish level scenarios as well. Okay, let's take a look at the Cypher Cards. The first thing you'll notice here is that I've got 5 piles of Cypher Cards, and the reason for that is that Collision Course introduces faction-specific Cypher Cards. So the top 4 piles here correspond to the various 4 factions in the game, and the largest bottom pile down here corresponds to a new set of generic Cypher Cards. Now, of course, there's a lot to say to go over all these things, but one of the things I find most interesting about them in general is there are several that apply to units that are protecting objective points to make them stronger while they're trying to defend those locations on the battlefield. Another interesting thing to note is that for the faction-specific Cypher card decks, they're not exactly even in terms of colors. So if I hold up like this guy here, you got a fair bit of purple. Compare that to these are the new Empyreans. Yep, they don't have quite as much of certain colors. And then over here, the Marcher Worlds, they also have a lot of purple, for example. And then, of course, Iron Star Alliance has like 1 purple. So all told, you have 11 generic Cypher cards. You have 6 for each of the original 3 factions in the game. And then the Empyreans only get 5. And as for my favorite one from the Iron Star Alliance, which is my primary faction, I'm liking the Devotion Paradigm, which allows me to return 1 model to a squad every turn for the remainder of the pulse round. That's really cool. And pretty much every faction has something disgusting and broken like that, because let's face it, this is a Privateer Press game. Let's talk about the new type of unit, the vehicle. This is the Interceptor for the Iron Star Alliance. And what makes me the most excited about this vehicle right off the bat are these pieces right here. This large miniature is mostly resin. Now, as someone who makes and sells their own tabletop miniatures line, I get why pewter is so appealing to companies. Pewter, for miniature material, is the most accessible way to mass produce gaming miniatures, but I'll be honest with you, the era of large multi-part pewter miniatures like the Warjacks from Warcaster here, that's kind of past. Plastic and resin miniatures are just so much nicer. So, with that little commentary out of the way, let me build this guy and I'll talk about some of the interesting features of vehicles as I do. So on the gameplay side of things, if you're hoping the vehicles will be something radically new, well, they're not. Their unit card is pretty much similar to what we already have, and like Warjacks, they do have some customization with a weapon hardpoint and then a number of weapon points they can spend. From there, the kit gives you a couple different weapon choices you can use for the said vehicle, as well as in this case with the Interceptor, you have already a base set of fixed guns to use. They're actually called fixed guns. The one new thing with the vehicle are these things called maneuvers. Now each vehicle has a card like this listing off what maneuvers they can do. Once per turn, you can choose to execute one of these maneuvers, and they basically make your vehicle a little bit more variable in how it works. For the Interceptor, you have the choice of either basically re-rolling defense rolls, re-rolling attack rolls, or going a little bit faster. So that's as far as I'm going to get with the assembly on this miniature here. I seem to have an extra pilot for some reason. It looks to be the exact same piece that what I have. I appear to be missing a front fin, which that doesn't really bother me. Having one less set of fiddly bits that are going to break off is fine with me. But I don't know where my plastic stand is to attach this guy to the base. I'm not sure if I lost it or if the kit didn't come with one. I may have been showing this to different people, so I don't know what happened to it. I'll have to try to figure that one out. Okay, we'll move on. So let's move on to talking about the new Empyreans command group. This is the new starter set for the new race in Warcaster, and I'm going to call them Empyreans. Now, I'm not 100% sure if that's the official canonized pronunciation. Feel free to drop a comment in below pointing to some Privateer Press video where they pronounce their names, but you know what? It's Kador, not Kador, so I may not really care. I'm such a horrible jerk sometimes. Okay, so this starter set here, even though it's released alongside Collision Course, the expansion, it doesn't actually require Collision Course to play. There's nothing unique to the new expansion in this starter set. It's just pretty much like the original 3 that came out with the first Kickstarter. You have a light warjack, you have 2 solos, one being a combat solo, one being equivalent of a reaver, and then you've got a 3-man infantry squad. And then along with this, you have your standard rulebook, same thing as you got in the first set of starter sets, the staff cards for the new units, you have the same set of Cypher Cards that came with the original set, and of course the same dice along with, well, the same tokens. So let's go ahead and get these miniatures assembled, and we'll talk about some of the more interesting things about this faction as I'm doing that. Going through the units, you have the Demon Warjack. Its stats are pretty run-of-the-mill for a Warjack. Defense 3, Armor 4, everything else is about where you'd expect for a Warjack like this, with 5 weapon points and 3 hard points. Aside from its usual, there are some rather commonly available special abilities, but one of the interesting things about this one is called the Disruption Engine. When it hits a model with an attack, it can spike to cause enemy Cypher Cards on that model to expire, and that's one of the interesting features of this Warjack for all of its weapons. On the weapon front, we have a nice, powerful melee weapon. There are 2 different kind of moderate range, fairly generic but powerful ranged weapons in the form of the Nova Cannon and the Fulcrum. Starfire Array is once again another moderately ranged weapon, a range 12, but it does have the Defense Matrix, which gives it a +3 defense against ballistic weapons when the model is charged. And then the Phase Tractile Cannon, relatively short range weapon, not particularly powerful, but it does ignore line of sight and cover when attacking with this weapon if the model is charged. And then finally we have the Gravitonic Lash. This is a short range but power 3 weapon. Yeah, so the cool thing this does is when your weapon damages an enemy model of an equal or smaller size base, you can basically drag that model towards you. So then we got the Fulcrum. Now this is the combat solo. He's got a pretty moderate ranged weapon that's decently powerful. Stats are pretty average, I suppose. All the stats are kind of in the same range in this game. It's got the ability to mess with ciphers and arc, as I was talking about earlier, but a lot of its unique abilities deal with moving units around on the battlefield. Slip Field allows it to move if someone misses when shooting at it. The Void Phaser is a way to spike to move friendly units around the battlefield. And the Dislocator, which is part of the Void Cannon attack, you can spike to move the enemy unit or the enemy model that you just hit with the attack. So next up is the Oculus. This is the Weaver solo. In addition to the whole Cypher Card arc thing, it's got the Arc Relay, which allows it to channel Fury ciphers. And its cool ability, though, is the Phase Aligner. When this model is charged, ignore line of sight when resolving Fury attacks channeled through it. So this guy can shoot this Furies through walls. That is pretty freaking cool. And it also, under certain circumstances, has the ability to reroll the attack or damage roll when it makes a Fury attack. Finally, we have the Saber Strike Force. This is the 3-man squad you see here. I think probably its coolest ability among its several options is called the Eclipse Drive. It can spike at the end of the activation, and if it does so, you don't place an activation token on it. So you could potentially have these guys keep going turn after turn if you keep giving them a arc and then spike to remove it. That is okay. That could be really useful for capturing objectives kind of late in a pulse round. I like it. Yeah, so these miniatures are just absolutely amazing in their art style. I'm just loving them. They might be one of the coolest faction styles I've ever seen. They have a little bit of this weird, I guess, with these tails coming off them, a little bit of reminiscent of the tails that Protoss have, or I guess the hair that Protoss have that connect to the Kala, that effect going on there. It feels like maybe a little bit of the style of, say, like the Prometheans from Halo 4, that whole post-biological thing going on, but at the very least, they're the coolest looking faction right now in Warcaster. Probably because they don't have the generic Space Marines to them, which is really nice, but yeah, these guys are freaking incredible. So that's it for the new Empyreans. I got one more little box here to take a look at, and inside is one of the new infantry units for the Iron Star Alliance. These are the Paladin Defenders. As you can tell from looking at the miniature with their spear and shield here, the Paladin Defenders are heavily armored melee units. They've got a fusion spear, which is a short range but high power weapon, and they've got an armor 4, which is really nice for Iron Star Alliance infantry. Probably their nicest ability is an intercept driver. This allows them to spike and take a hit for a nearby friendly model. And that's it for the Paladin Defenders. I'm liking how they're looking, especially crazy charging guy over here. And, well, I also got an extra bit with them. Apparently there's an extra backpack if someone's missing one. And look what I found here. It's the missing fiddly bit from my interceptor vehicle. Now, I'm not sure if this bit got mixed in with my Defenders at some point when I was looking at all the pieces earlier today or yesterday, or it's possible this was just sitting here for the entire video and I didn't see it. Both are equally likely. We'll find out when I review the video. Or if it was sitting here the whole time, I imagine someone already probably mentioned it in the comments. Okay, so that's it for the miniatures. And that brings us to the end here of this video. We're talking about our first looks at Warcaster Collision Course. I'm looking forward to get this on the tabletop and trying out some of those new scenarios and of course the new units. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more Warcaster stuff. I'm going to be doing some speed painting here and probably trying to get these Empyreans painted up as fast as possible because that's what I do on this channel and give them that cool little weird light gray, pinkish purple glowing thing going on. And maybe even dive into some of the aspects of trying out the race mode, things like that. I'm not entirely sure, but this won't be the last Warcaster video coming up. So with that, once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. I want to thank you guys all for watching, and have a great week.